Good evening and welcome to the Aspen Institute. I'm Gina Murdock.
I'm Jerry Murdock.
And together we are delighted to welcome you to this evening's Murdock Mind, Body, Spirit series program. So Jerry's a trustee at the Institute, and we sponsor this series as a way to reflect on the founding principles of Aspen, the idea that a recipe for human flourishing is to nurture the whole individual, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So what I want to say to you is that it's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight and to be here with Jerry and to be here with His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Bhutan, and Dr. Deepak Chopra. You can clap if you like. So I'm very honored personally. It was 10 years ago that I was up here on this stage introducing Deepak for the first in the series, the Murdock Mind, Body, Spirit series, when he came to speak on behalf of the Self-Directed Biological Transformation Initiative. So it's wonderful to be back here 10 years later in the same exact spot with Dr. Chopra. Dr. Chopra, as many of you know, is the author of 95 books translated into 43 languages, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. For the last 30 years, Deepak has been at the forefront of the meditation revolution, and his latest book, Digital Dharma, is due to be released next month. He navigates the balance between technology and expanded awareness, explaining that while AI cannot duplicate human intelligence, it can vastly enhance personal and spiritual growth. Time magazine has named him one of their 100 most influential people. Through our decades-long friendship with Dr. Deepak Chopra, he's become a close friend of our family and a partner in the pursuit of cultivating enlightened leadership. So there's no better way to celebrate this aspiration than to feature His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Bhutan, the embodiment of enlightened leadership. You couldn't find a more down-to-earth Prime Minister than His Excellency here. He served as the Prime Minister from 2013 to 2018 and was re-elected for a second term in January of 24. Before entering active politics, he was a dedicated civil servant, focusing on developing policies and programs to enhance technical education, vocational training in Bhutan. His commitment to social welfare extended beyond his official duties as he volunteered to establish Bhutan's first youth center and advocated for educational staff welfare. In politics, he played a role in founding the People's Democratic Party, the first registered political party in Bhutan, and continues to serve as the president. A strong advocate of gross national happiness, I know you're all interested in this. He has spoken on leadership, conservation, climate change, poverty, democracy, and happiness at the United Nations, TED, and various international conferences. He holds an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in public administration from Harvard. So before we move on to the talk, I want to invite us to have a mindful moment here, because a lot of what you're going to be hearing about is mindfulness and Bhutan and the focus on happiness. So I want to just invite us all here to take a moment, take a breath into our bodies and feel our feet on the earth. And just really bring your whole entire body, mind, spirit into this space. That's the inspiration of this series, is to integrate the three, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So if you would just join me and close your eyes, take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale out through your mouth. And just notice and feel the distinct difference when you bring all of you into the space and your presence is felt and it is welcomed, and we are so glad to have each and every one of you here. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Jerry, His Excellency, Mr. Jerry Murdock.
Thank you, Gina. I've had the good fortune to be invited into His Excellency's home and Dr. Chopra's home and having a meal with them. And I want to say that in both cases, it was an overwhelming feeling of warmth, wisdom, and happiness. And I wish for you to feel the same this evening. Thank you.
Please join us in welcoming His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Bhutan, and Dr. Deepak Chopra. Enjoy.
Are you looking forward to this? A little more enthusiasm, please. Okay, let me ask you the same question, which is, are you looking forward to this conversation? But don't answer it till I raise my hand, okay? And then you can be enthusiastic again. Are you looking forward to this conversation? So the question is a mental event. The answer is a mental event. In between is your spirit, awareness or consciousness. So we talk about mind, body, spirit. The body is what you can see right now. The mind is the conversation you're having with yourself. And the spirit is watching silently. With that, please welcome His Excellency. This evening's topic is about enlightened leadership and mindful living. And there's no one better to have this conversation with than His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Bhutan. As you know, the world is in crisis, particularly leadership globally. We don't need to name names, but I think you'll see that when we think of leadership these days, we think of cronyism, power mongering, influence peddling, and corruption. So we do need enlightened leadership if we want to see a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. Your Excellency, what is enlightened leadership, and why do you think Bhutan is actually going to be the beacon for this, for the whole world right now?
Thank you. Gina, Jerry, thank you for getting me over here. It's my first trip to Aspen, and my experience is beyond my wildest aspirations. Thank you so very much. Deepak, thank you for sharing the stage with me. Thank you for bringing me on this stage. Let me address the elephant in this room. This packed house, all of you, you're not here to see me. You're here to see this man.
Come on.
He's a celebrity, a mindfulness guru, an enlightened being himself. You're not here to see me. I know that. And I can tell you, when Jerry said, come to the Aspen Institute, I said, yes. Speak at the Aspen Institute, I said, yes. I didn't even think about what the topic is going to be about and who I'm supposed to talk with. When I heard it was Deepak Chopra, I said, no. This is totally, firstly, it's like, he's a guru. He's a teacher. And in our traditions, you have the relationship between the teacher and the student. I'm not even his student. You must work hard. You must earn to be a student to a guru. And I'm very far away from that, sir. So as I sit near this celebrity who's a guru of mindfulness and mindful living, I'm totally outside my comfort zone. I mean it, sir. I'm deeply honored.
You're very gracious.
You mentioned Bhutan. How many of you have been to Bhutan? Raise your hand. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. At the reception, every second one of you have been to Bhutan. I want to give you a responsibility, 2 responsibilities. Those of you who've been to Bhutan. The first responsibility is, okay, those of you who've been to Bhutan, raise your hand. Yeah, now look around you. You see those hands that are not raised? Get them to raise their hands by next year. That's your first responsibility. And your second responsibility is come back. Come and visit us again. Bhutan as a beacon for enlightened leadership. Yes and no. We are a small country tucked away in the Himalayas, sandwiched between giants, just 700,000 of us. We can share a story. I'm not sure we can be a beacon. When I think of enlightened leadership, the reason I talk about enlightened leadership is because, yes, it is important. We have our share of challenges in this day and age, and we need enlightened leaders to help navigate these difficult times, to help us out of these difficult times to a better place. And isn't this what leadership is all about? To take stock of our current situation and help us move to a better place. Because if the current place is good enough, you don't need leaders. You need good managers to keep us there. But if it is not good enough, if there is a better place, a leader should take us to that better place. But that journey is fraught with challenges. And therefore, I do believe we need enlightened leaders. Enlightenment, a concept that all of you are familiar with. In my spirituality, in Buddhism, we believe that, to keep things very simple, we believe that the overarching goal is to become enlightened, which is to escape the cycle of suffering. I feel so awkward saying this in front of this Guruji here. But the cycle of samsara, of suffering, of birth, life, death, rebirth. And this cycle of suffering continues. And when you can understand the truth, when you have clarity, you can escape it and you become enlightened. Whereas we, the unenlightened ones, will continue in the cycle of suffering. But there are certain enlightened beings we believe, we call them Chanchu Sempas or Bodhisattvas. They have become enlightened. They have escaped this cycle of suffering, but they choose to come back so that they can help others attain enlightenment. They choose on their own volition to come back. And we believe in many bodhisattvas. And there is this trinity of bodhisattvas that we take very, very seriously. This is called the Riksum Gemba. There are three bodhisattvas. We have many bodhisattvas. And the three of them, the trinity of them, we call Riksum Gemba, is the bodhisattva of wisdom, the bodhisattva of courage, the bodhisattva of compassion. Now, I'm not going to go into their names, okay, but just think of this. Wisdom, courage, and compassion. Because we have bodhisattvas for long life and good health and money and everything else also. But this trinity we call Riksum Gemba. And I believe that they represent enlightened leadership, because as bodhisattvas, they've come back on their own volition to serve us, to serve all sentient beings. So there's a sense of selfless service in their returning. Now, the first one represents wisdom. Jambayang represents wisdom. Wisdom is not knowledge. It is beyond knowledge. It is the ability to see into the future. It is the ability to visualize this better place that leaders need to visualize. Visualizing is one thing. Acting on what you visualize takes courage. Without courage, your aspirations remain dreams. So courage is important. The bodhisattva of courage, hence, is important. And then you have the bodhisattva of compassion. Because wisdom by itself is of not much good. You need courage to act on that wisdom. But if you act on the wisdom without compassion, you become an authoritarian. You need compassion. Because change is required to go from where you are to that better place. And that journey requires sacrifices. A leader must have compassion. And so, when a leader has the attributes of the bodhisattvas, the attributes of the Riksum Gemba, of wisdom, of courage, of compassion, and is driven by selfless service, they are the embodiment of our bodhisattvas, and I call them enlightened leaders, and this is the type of leadership that I do believe that we require.
So, when I introduced His Excellency, I said Bhutan, it can be a beacon for enlightened leadership for the world. And he said, we are a little country, and the world is so large, so big, the problem is so huge. I was in Bhutan recently for the 117th anniversary of the nation.
We are blessed to have you.
Yes. And I saw wisdom, I saw courage, and I saw compassion. His Majesty the King spoke on that occasion. And the ceremony started at 9 in the morning, but people had come from all over the country at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. They were there waiting with their children, with their grandchildren, for 4 or 5 hours before the ceremony started. Ceremonies lasted several hours, and then His Majesty spoke. And then, to my amazement, His Majesty and the Queen, they came and danced in the stadium with 30,000 people. There was no security, there were no guns, there was celebration, there was dancing, there was courage, there was compassion, and there was wisdom. I saw it. And it says in the Vedas, they say you need one spark to set a forest on fire. That one spark is Bhutan, Your Excellency. That one spark is Bhutan that can set the fire for wisdom, compassion, and courage. And we need that in this moment when the whole world, look at the world, there's war, there's terrorism, mechanized death, social, economic injustice of all kinds, and chronic disease, and total absence of joy. Have you witnessed the political debates? How often do you see or experience joy? It's just constant bickering and constant attack. This was enlightened leadership for me. You talk about the cycle of suffering. Yes, we suffer because, according to the principles of the great Buddha and the Buddhism that Bhutan has fostered amongst other nations, we suffer because of the socially induced hallucination of the separate self. We suffer because we don't have empathy and compassion and joy and equanimity. We suffer because we don't see that in the end we're all inseparably connected. So I would say Bhutan is the beacon for the globe, and that it is very important right now for the world to be listening to the vision of the great luminaries of Bhutan, which has never been colonized, which has never been at war, and which has a sustainable environment. The most important thing is that I saw was the king and the queen of your country dancing with children, grandchildren, and the populace. I've never seen that. I could not imagine a Gaza there. I could not imagine a Ukraine-Russia war there. I could not imagine an India-Pakistan in conflict there. So you are a beacon, and you are an example of this kind of enlightened leadership. And I would like to ask you right now, since we have limited time, this enlightened leadership, which is an example for the rest of the world, is now taking leapfrog into a new adventure, which His Majesty announced. I would like you to share this great vision that is happening right now as we speak, because, if you look at social science and social scientists, they say magic and emergence happens when you have shared vision, maximum diversity, everyone complementing each other's strengths, and an emotional and spiritual bond. I'll repeat that. Shared vision, maximum diversity, emotional and spiritual bonding, and maximizing or complementing each other's strengths. As I look at this new project, I see those ingredients. Please share with us this vision that His Majesty is taking to the world right now.
So first, the spark setting the world on fire. We can share stories. And I invite you to listen to our story. And more importantly, I want to hear your story. Because this is what gives us hope. We share much more in common than we have differences all over the world. And it is our pleasure, it is our joy to share our unique story. A part of the unique story is that in Bhutan, we've been blessed with enlightened leaders. When I talk of enlightened leadership, people think that I'm talking about political leaders as in prime ministers. No, it couldn't be further from the truth. I'm talking about the bodhisattvas, those enlightened beings who choose to come back to live among us and to help us gain enlightenment. That's enlightened leadership. At another level, we've been blessed with enlightened leaders in Bhutan in that we've been blessed by enlightened monarchs. Our kings are the epitome, the embodiment of all those characteristics, those virtues of those bodhisattvas, of wisdom, of compassion, of courage, of selfless service. We've been very fortunate. And so, an example of this is gross national happiness. Now, some of you may have heard about gross national happiness. This is a unique development philosophy that puts the happiness and well-being of our people in the center of the development agenda, not the economic growth. Economic growth is important, but it must be balanced with sustainability and equity. Economic growth is important, but it must be balanced with our cultural identity, environmental preservation, environmental sustainability, and good governance. And I dare say we have succeeded in our gross national happiness journey, in that our economy is small, it's very small, but it is sustainable, largely sustainable. Socially, we've made a tremendous progress. During my father's generation, we were literally in the medieval ages. And today, every child goes to school. Education is free, healthcare is free, there's a strong social support system in place. Our culture, we are custodians of a very unique spiritual tradition and culture, a unique Buddhism of Vajrayana. Environmental sustainability, we are one of the few carbon negative countries. We sequester 5 times more carbon dioxide than we emit. A carbon negative country, blessed with ancient forests and biodiversity hotspots. And then good governance that I spoke about. We are the only country in the world where democracy had to be imposed on us by our monarchs at the peak of the popularity. We didn't have to fight for it, we didn't earn it. They had to convince us, and then when we were reluctant, they had to impose democracy on us. Today, democracy is very vibrant. We've already had 4 elections and we've changed 4 governments. But the transition has all been smooth. So, gross national happiness, this idea comes from enlightened leadership. To take Bhutan from what was in the medieval ages to a fairly modern country, but a unique country that is still grounded in its values and traditions. We need to go beyond that. And so, as we take gross national happiness to the next level, this is the project that Deepak is alluding to. His Majesty the King has outlined a royal vision for a special administrative region, a special city, one grounded in our values, our traditions, our spirituality, our environmental priorities. And this place is called the Gelifu Mindfulness City. A city that has an area of 2,600 square kilometers, fairly big city. But a city that has already in it 2 ancient forests that are protected by law, teeming with biodiversity, and linked together with a biological corridor. A landscape that has ancient rivers flowing from our glaciers into the plains of India, and many other waterways crisscrossing the 2,500, 2,600 square kilometers. A landscape where we have the opportunity to define a new urban living space, an urban living space that is driven by values, tradition, spirituality, rather than mindless material growth. Economic growth will be important in this area, but our priorities are that rather than letting the forces of market forces define how the city grows, it will be our values, not least of which is going to be mindfulness. In a nutshell, sir.
Well, again, from my short experience, and of course everybody in the world has heard about the happiness project and gross national happiness. It's Bhutan's identity right now. And so I was sharing with His Excellency some of the research that has been happening in the area of happiness. And believe it or not, social scientists have something called the happiness formula, which goes somewhat like this. H is equal to S plus C plus V. So H stands for happiness, is equal to S. It's the set point in the brain. So set point in the brain is if you feel separate from others. You know, one of the biggest principles in Buddhism is we are all interconnected. We are all inseparably one in the ultimate ground of being, which is called consciousness. So if you feel separate, this socially induced hallucination of the separate self, it creates anxiety, it creates trauma, and this trauma then recycles as anger and hostility and guilt and shame and depression, which is the #1 pandemic of our time right now. I don't know how many of you know that every 40 seconds somebody in the world is dying from suicide. That suicide has now become the second most common cause of death amongst teens in the world. The first common cause of death among teens is accidents, which is also related to drug use and depression and mental distress. But if you feel connected, then you're a happy person, which is one of the basic principles. You know, if you've heard of the basic dharma seals of Buddhism, #1, the separate self does not exist. #2, the relative is impermanent. And #3, nirvana is the ultimate liberation from the cycle of suffering. So first principle here is we're connected. And if you feel connected to the world, then that influences your happiness. 50% of our happiness every day comes from, am I connected or am I separate? The second part of the formula, H is equal to S plus C, is conditions for living, which is mainly about money. We were talking about money comes second, but here's the data. Money adds about 10 to 12% to your happiness experience. If you win the lottery today, and let's say you're making $100,000 a year, you suddenly make 50 million, are you going to be happy? The answer is yes, you'll be ecstatic. But in 6 months, your happiness will plateau, and in 1 year, you'll be back to your set point. There are only 2 categories of people who are stressed about money. The extremely poor, because they can think of nothing else, and the extremely rich, because it becomes their identity. It becomes their identity. And you know, I was talking to Jerry Murdock earlier, and he was saying one of the unfortunate things that might happen to Aspen is that it becomes a place of prestige instead of a place where you nourish your soul, where you flourish, as you were saying, where you flourish. You're here in Aspen. Look at this. You know, those trees are your lungs. This air is your breath. The earth is recycling as your body. The rivers and the clouds are your circulation. And the stars that you see at night, which you can't see in other places, they gave you the atoms that are now in your body. We call that the environment. It's our body. We have a personal body, we have a universal body, and they're both equally ours. You put a rabbit in a vacuum, it dies. You put a plant in a vacuum, it dies. Put them both together, they thrive. They thrive. And this is what I saw in Bhutan, a reverence for what people call the environment. You know, to look at a mountain and look at it with respect and reverence. To look at a tree and see that it is breathing because you breathe, it breathes. And because it breathes, you breathe. So money is important, of course, for economic development, but it's not the most important thing. 10 to 12%. The last 40% of happiness comes from your daily choices. And there are two kinds of choices we make every day. One is for personal pleasure. And, you know, shopping is apparently, I'm told, the number one reason that people seek pleasure. We have a very ugly word for human beings in our Western society. We call them consumers. It's an ugly word for stardust beings with self-awareness. You know, but shopping is the number one reason that people use to make themselves happy. But other things, entertainment, alcohol, etc., sex, food, do they make us happy? Yes, transiently. But there's another way that makes people happy, which is called fulfillment, when you have meaning and purpose in your life. This afternoon, when we met, and you know, people are talking about purpose, purpose-driven organizations, purpose-driven businesses, and it occurred to me again, you know, Bhutan is an example, you know, with these Buddhist principles. There are three principles. Take refuge in the dharma. Dharma means purpose. And there's only one purpose in the end. It's liberation from suffering. And to alleviate the suffering of others, not only yours. So, dharma, take refuge in the dharma. Take refuge in the Buddha, which means higher consciousness. And take refuge in the Sangha, the community. If you have those three ingredients, service, purpose of alleviating others' suffering, including your own, and having a community which is bonded. This is the ideal community, by the way, you know, that could, as an experiment for repeating the gross happiness project right here at Aspen, because you have 9,000 people living here. That's not a huge population. And if you can create this community of selfless service and the intention of the dharma to eliminate suffering, and this spiritual bond that we share, this could be the second, you know, and you say we're a small country. This is a small community. This should be our experimental hub to start this pandemic of happiness across the world, because there's no thing that is more important than a pandemic of happiness to cure the problems of the world right now. As we listen to these political debates and when you go to vote, keep that in your mind. You know, what we need is a joyous pandemic of happiness, and Bhutan is the example. This Prime Minister, elected Prime Minister, he said, you know, His Majesty is the head of the country, but he's an elected Prime Minister for his second term. And His Majesty's father abdicated the throne at a very young age. So, you know, it's a country of selfless service, and it fully lives up to its example of what it says it is doing, it is doing. It's not pretending to be something it's not. So, yeah, Your Excellency, talking about enlightened leadership, you really eloquently described enlightened leadership. In this mindfulness city that's coming up, as I've heard it referred to as GM.
Gelifu is the name of the place.
Gelifu,
mindfulness
city, is going to have all these principles, but as you mentioned, it's also in a way, I'm listening to you, going to be like the Silicon Valley and very, very advanced technology, emphasis on health, sustainability, and all the principles we are talking about, but also a place where people from all over the world are invited to come, right?
Yes.
So
enlightened leadership, wisdom,
courage,
courage,
compassion.
compassion, driven by selfless service. His Majesty is an enlightened leader. And his wisdom is that we need to redefine urban living and urban spaces to suit our own cultural values in Bhutan, but also to make something that's acceptable, not just for our future generation, but also for the world. That is the wisdom I see. The courage is actually to implement it. And this is what he's hard at work at. So if any of you are interested in partnering with us, Jerry, Gina, please join our journey. Join the journey to develop a unique city. This is not like any other city. There have been many cities that are being developed. Some have succeeded, many have failed. This is quite a unique city in that people must add value to other people. People must add value to our culture. People must add value to the environment. People must add value to the future. And I think this is a wonderful journey to be on. The wisdom is there, the courage is there, and in His Majesty's compassion, because obviously we citizens would be very nervous. He spends an inordinate amount of time patiently explaining what this journey will entail for us Bhutanese. And this is why His Majesty, the embodiment of enlightened leadership, I personally have a front row seat to see enlightened leadership in action. I've been very fortunate. Happiness, very important. All of us want happiness. And all of us know that we are not talking about this transitionary happiness, this hedonistic happiness. This is also important, right? To feel good, to get a dopamine hit is good. It's important. But when we talk of happiness, we talk of being fulfilled, having a sense of fulfillment, of contentment. And the question is, how can you measure it? How can you enhance that? And this equation is one of them. In Bhutan, we have gross national happiness. Now, gross national happiness is at a national level, and we actually measure gross national happiness every 5 years. So in our case, we have 9 different domains. So health, education, living standards. And living standards, we have a long way to go. Health and education, living standards, 3 of them. Environment and governance. Yeah. So health, education, living standards, all governments accept to be important. Environment and governance also, now increasingly, most governments have accepted. But we have 4 more domains, which I believe are still at the cutting edge of governance. Psychological well-being, time use, cultural vitality, community vitality. These 9 domains, health, education, living standards, environment governance, psychological well-being, time use, cultural vitality, community vitality, are important conditions for what we call overall happiness and well-being of our people. I believe you can apply them to your personal selves also. In applying to your personal self, for me, because these domains are also quite complicated. In fact, when we measure it, these domains are divided into 33 variables, are divided into 156 odd questions. And when we do the sampling every 5 years, when you do the survey, each questionnaire could take anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. It's a massive exercise. But for my own living, I see to enhance happiness, I need to be fit. I need to be fit to be happy. Right, Gina? You need to be fit. Mentally fit. Mental fitness is important. Emotional fitness is important. Physical fitness is important. You've got to be healthy, right? Spiritual fitness is important. Financial fitness is important. And social fitness. These 6 different fitnesses I try to cultivate. I'm sharing with you my innermost thoughts. I need to be physically fit. Because if I'm not physically fit, if I'm not healthy, I become a liability. I'm of no use to my family, forget about society, and I'm of limited use to myself. I need to be mentally fit also for the same reasons to be able to contribute. I need to be emotionally fit. My EQ should be high. We know what we're talking about. Spiritually, I should have some anchors. I need to have a compass. I need to be predictable to myself and to my family and to society. Financial fitness is very important, make no doubt about it. I'd love to take that lottery on. But jokes aside, you need to have a career, you need to have fitness, right? And socially fit. You need to be connected with oneself, with family and society. This fitness allows you a sense of happiness by giving you a sense of security, a sense of identity, and a sense of purpose. For I do believe that if you do not have a sense of security, you just cannot be, you'll be too anxious to be happy. If you do not have a sense of identity, you have no idea who you are. You don't have a sense of belonging. You just cannot be happy. And if you do not have a sense of purpose, you cannot be happy. So you've got to be fit, and you have to have enhance your sense of security, identity, and purpose.
Your Excellency did remind me of something just now. And that happiness, leadership, and well-being go together. And there's a lot of good studies right now from Gallup, where I have had the good fortune of being on their board of advisors. They look at 5 areas of happiness right now. So one is corporate well-being, sorry, not happiness, corporate well-being, social well-being, physical well-being, community well-being, and financial well-being. And they're all very indicative of what the future of leadership in that country is. You can actually predict things like hospital admissions, crime, social unrest, just based on the indices for well-being in these buckets: corporate well-being, social well-being, community well-being, financial well-being, and social well-being, to which now we are adding spiritual well-being. If you have that complete component, then you have the formula for a future which is very bright. So if I asked you just one simple question, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is about physical well-being, because you mentioned this right now. You need to be physically fit, mentally alert. If I asked you just one question, you don't have to raise your hand. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much energy do you have to do everything that you want to do? And if you intuitively say 8, 9, or 10, you're thriving. If you say intuitively 6 or 7, you're struggling in some area in your life. And if you say 5 or less, you're suffering, and you might already have a disease. This kind of formulation can be extended to all the 5 buckets, and you can actually predict the future of a country, of a family, of a business, or in a community. And the way you measure gross happiness index is actually a perfect example for how leadership, happiness, and well-being can be combined. And lest I forget, the fastest way to be happy, instantly happy, also comes from the Buddhist principles. And that is, make somebody else happy. And you don't have to spend money. You don't have to go to Goldman Sachs or wherever to buy an expensive gift. 4 A's: attention, deep listening; affection, deep caring; appreciation, noticing the gift that everyone comes with; and radical acceptance. Today in our little few meetings that we had, thanks to Jerry and Gina's courtesy, I've now become part of your group. And Jerry mentioned security synchronicity, and security, serenity, and synchronicity. So synchronicity is another word for grace, for good luck, for meaningful coincidences. It happens when we all take care of each other. So thank you very much. I think we're running out of time, so I would ask, we have 10, 15 minutes for you to ask questions. His Excellency has another occasion to go to. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And if there's a microphone, we can... Any questions for His Excellency? How many of you are going to come to Bhutan now?
Simpler the better.
Raise your hands. How many are you coming to Bhutan? Why not the rest?
And I would... What?
Yes.
I would just like to say, my voice is a little loud. It's okay. It's on. Why don't you say it's on? Okay, here we go. I have hiked Bhutan for many, many years. And I would love you to hike with me next time I'm there. I mean...
She has hiked.
Tomorrow?
No, soon. Very soon. I mean, many people go to the...
Hike here in Aspen?
No, yes, Aspen. Let's do Aspen together. Love that.
This morning I was hiking. I went on the Aspen Trail and then Little Cloud Trail. And then I got back, and one of my friends, our ambassador, shows me a video of a bear that was outside.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, sorry.
But I'm saying when I'm in Bhutan,
She wants to hike with you in Bhutan.
many people go to the Tshering towards the last
That's
day.
not a hike, that's a pilgrimage.
That's the hike I do when I first arrive. Every big trail I've gone on, I love it there, and I would love you to come with me when I go there.
Wow, coming from a resident of Aspen, that is a very, very big validation.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
I love that. Thank you.
At the back. Thank you for visiting us so often, ma'am.
I thank you both for being here. When it comes to the happiness survey and questionnaire that you have people in your country fill out, is there ever grumblings or do they not want to participate? Because it seems to me just the fact that many people, 700,000 people, want to participate in something together alone is an indicator of happiness. But do you ever have some kind of disgruntlement about having to do that?
Very interesting, ma'am. Never thought of it.
Oh my God.
Wow, really?
I think we take our people for granted.
Well, I was just,
Very good observation.
well, that's great.
So,
Thank you.
Since most of our people are rural-based, really, there's been no grumbling. Yeah. Thank you for that observation. Thank you. That's brilliant. The first time they did this survey in 2010, next was 2015, then 2020, but 2020 was COVID, so it got postponed to 2022. And the trend has been good, favorable, slight improvements. 2010, the questionnaire was very long. And in one case, I'm not exaggerating, while interviewing that person passed out. And 2015 it improved, 2022 it improved more. So the questions have gotten shorter, maybe that's why we are getting happier. Where's the mic?
Over there.
Hi, Your Excellency. I just wrote a book called Intentionality, and it went in a lot about the conditioning that our parents have on our own happiness. And I'm literally, could be 24 hours away from having my first baby myself, and, well, my partner is.
What are you doing here?
Here she is. She's here. And I'm curious, what are you doing to help the upcoming children? Are you educating the parents on how to be more conscious parents, and what are you doing in the education system?
I desperately hope we don't have to educate anybody. And I say that because we've inherited very strong values. Our tradition is still intact. If we have to educate parents, if we have to educate children on living, on values, it means we've lost the narrative.
A quick question. I'm a teacher and have used G&H for about a dozen years in my classroom. And I just wondered if Bhutanese have considered setting up, thinking about that notion of being a beacon, if you've considered setting up centers for teachers from other places in the world to come study and understand the Bhutanese vision to then bring back out to the world.
Please contact our ambassador. Okay, what's your name? Dave Meyer. As a teacher, I must say Mr. Meyer. So please contact our ambassador and let's work out something, not for you to bring teachers for teacher education or to study in Bhutan, but to swap stories. Okay, let's learn from each other.
Hello. I had a question about one of the components of your index that you mentioned that I was hoping that you could elaborate on. You mentioned time use. And what does that mean? What is it comprised of? What is the scale? What exactly is that referring to?
So time use, we measure many things, right? Several things. One of them is very simple. The amount you sleep. Are you sleeping 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours? And that is also related to your psychological well-being and your health, good health. But sleep is measured as time use. Time use also your work and life balance. This is a new concept because in rural Bhutan, we worked and we lived and we were a community. So this work-life balance was not an issue. But we need to start studying these things now. So that is also measured. Time use, the amount of time you spend working. And every one of the 3 surveys have revealed that our women work longer hours than men. Because we factor in homework also, housework, home care, homemaking, also as work. And women work far more than men. So these are a few things we measure. And then our surveys show that in general, women are not as happy as men. So they're all interrelated, see?
Hi, thank you for being here. My question is about your mindfulness city. And you mentioned that you wanted maximum diversity, but synchronized thinking, or let me see what I had written down, I'm sorry. Oh, shared vision. Maximum diversity of people with a shared vision. How might one achieve that?
Oh, we have a shared vision. Maximum diversity.
I mentioned that because the new city is inviting people from all over the world, from all demographics, to create business there and to become entrepreneurs there. And maximum diversity doesn't mean necessarily diversity of ethnicity, maximum diversity of education, talent, science, technology, humanitarians, educators, entertainers, songwriters, and storytellers. That's maximum diversity.
Questions for
No.
Deepak Chopra? Remember, I acknowledged the elephant in the room. You don't have to feel bad.
So you speak a lot about happiness and contributions, and I'm curious what love looks like in Bhutan, and if this is a concept or a notion that's often spoken to, or if it's just naturally embodied.
If my wife were here, I'll give a very romantic answer. But since she's not here, I'm a long-suffering husband. But So jokes aside, love is important, right? Love is important. But in my view, compassion is what you should be after. Compassion. Yeah. Whether it's in your family, in your relationship, in your family, or in society, which is another way of saying love.
In Buddhism, loving kindness and compassion and empathy and joy and serenity or equanimity go together. They're called divine attitudes.
Hello, thanks so much for all of this. You mentioned the role of women and women's work in Bhutan. I do not know. What's the arena for women's roles and leadership in Bhutan? Is it equitable with men? When you mention happiness and work?
I'm going to sound flippant, but I'm absolutely serious. So, traditionally we were a matriarchal society. Husbands moved into their wives' home. Groom would go into the bride's home. And obviously, the bride's family, the wife's family would take care of her, and the husband had to work. Property was transferred from mother to daughter. The men were expected, the sons were expected to fend for themselves or work for their wives. We don't have family names in Bhutan. So women do not take a man's name midway through their lives. They're born with a name and they carry that name throughout. That name is not drawn from their father or mother. It's an arbitrary name given by the Lama. So my name is Tshering Tobgay, my wife's name is Tashidoma, my daughter's name is Gele Yangzom, my son's name is Jamsa Tshering. The Tshering part is just an accident. We are born that way and we will die with those names. We don't need to change our names now. I don't want to get into the meaning of what it means to change your name and all that. Right? In modern Bhutan, a lot of the small businesses, but also a few of the big businesses, the leaders are women. Now this is the part where I may appear flippant. Women refuse to step up to politics in Bhutan. And in local government and in national government at the legislature level, as members of parliament, we have way too few women. Women are required just for one reason, because they bring in a different outlook, a different set of values. And this is very important for us. I am wondering now whether they're just so smart to stay out of politics. But we need more of them. So that is the situation.
Why do you think they refuse to take part in the legislation?
Politics is nasty, right? Even in Bhutan. And politicians are, what did you say? Power mongering, corrupt.
Cronies. Influence peddling.
Influence peddling. And you have a politician sitting like 6 inches away.
Well, we have an enlightened politician sitting 6. One more question, and then we have to wrap it up. So,
Sir, in your survey of happiness, obviously it reveals what citizens are happy about. I would imagine that it also reveals what citizens are not so happy about. What might those be?
So we measure the conditions of happiness, not whether people are happy or not. It's very difficult to measure whether a person is happy or not. I mean, Deepak will be able to because he's a profound man. He's thought about this. No, I'm being very serious, okay? But you ask me, I'm more concerned about love, how my wife treats me, whether I have money just now, whether I've danced or not, right? Whether I'm in Aspen or not. These are all temporary. And so we measure the conditions, because the basic conditions, you must have good health, you must have good education, your living standards, so time use, psychological well-being, so on and so forth. Those are the conditions for happiness, and those must be measured. Now you ask me, so we don't measure happiness, we measure the conditions of happiness. In what area we need to do work? Women are not as happy as men, which means we need to work there. our rural folks, our farmers are not as happy as urban people. And for one reason, because their work is menial, and having worked very hard, because we have such a rich environment, wildlife comes in and attacks their crops. So it's a very difficult life. Those who are educated are more happy than the less educated. So it gives you an idea of how to formulate policy and how to prioritize your policies and plans.
So we have come to the end of this evening's conversation, and I would just like to say that right now we are in the midst of a very, very contentious political environment, and I hope we can put this out in social media with your permission so that the
Keep
public...
me away from any contentious environment, sir.
No, but I think the contentious people could gather a little bit of good enthusiasm and inspiration from this conversation on enlightened leadership and well-being and mindfulness. So
let's share stories, right?
Let's share stories.
We'll share stories. And Jerry, Gina, Aspen Institute, thank you for organizing this. Deepak,
no, it's
I'm
Jerry
deeply
and Gina,
grateful
I am grateful
for holding my hand on the stage. And all of you here in Aspen, I mean, I know you know how fortunate you are. And I know that all of you are tremendously successful and you are leaders in your own right, whether it's personal leadership, leadership of your family, of society, or corporate leadership. Please exercise wisdom, exercise courage and compassion, and be driven by selfless service. Exercise the virtues of the bodhisattvas, of enlightened beings. Thank you very much.